lecture video, I asked you this question. The question was what kind of economy China is, or what kind of economy India is. What kind of economy China is, or India is. Now, I'm sure most of you by now you would have understood the concept, the difference between these three: socialist economy and communism and your capitalism. Let me make this statement, and the statement is: no country on this planet is perfectly capitalist or perfectly communist or perfectly socialist. I say no country on this planet can claim to be 100% socialist or your communist or your capitalist. This is a statement you need to remember. All countries are mixed economies. Say, all countries are mixed economies. But mixed economies with a tilt or predominantly falling into one category or other. So predominantly you may find that one country is predominantly it's, let's say, socialist, or let's say your communist. It's predominantly it has to be socialist or communist. Now what do you mean here by predominant? I explain this. All countries exist on a continuum. So let us draw a continuum, and that continuum is from socialism to capitalism. Socialism to capitalism. When I say continuum, it means here a country would be 100% socialist. It means all the ownership are owned by socialism. In the previous video, I have explained you that all resources are owned by government here, right? And in capitalism, 100% capitalist, if a country is here 100%, it means this is your midway. Consider this as your midway. If a country is here on this continuum, this country would be called your 100% capitalist. It means all the resources are owned by complete private ownership of resources, right? Okay, I say no country is 100% capitalist or 100% socialist. So all countries are somewhere in between, somewhere at this continuum. Let us take the example of North Korea. Now they say communist, or China. They say communist, but the truth is the resources are owned by the government. So in China also you have a government, and you all know that the government deals with the world and works as other government works. Then in North Korea also there is a government. So government is your established institutional mechanism that makes the highest law, that has the monopoly over the use of violence, and that exists. You talk about North Korea, so there is a monopoly of violence. Monopoly in terms of violence is with Kim Jong-un. Now Kim Jong-un is there in China. There is a system. So government exists. So these are not communist, right? But you talk about China, even private sector exists. There are private factories. There are foreign companies which are having their factories. There are special economic zones where you will find private companies. So China is somewhere on this continuum as a mix of your private ownership as well as your government ownership of the resources. So China is also somewhere here on the continuum. So on the continuum, when I say it is midway, it means it's a mix of your government ownership of the resources as well as private ownership of the resources. India is also somewhere here, towards your socialist side. You see, not midway. India is also somewhere here, towards socialist side. So India and China are at the same stage in terms of the type of economy. What is important here to know is that in which direction a country is moving. So if a country is moving towards private ownership of the resources, that country is on the path of your capitalism or on the path of your marketism. If a country is moving towards, let's say, nationalization of the resources. Nationalization is a term that you know. See, I am using this nationalization, not nationalism. Nationalism is a political term, right? Nationalization is nothing but when the private property and private resources are acquired by the government, be it at the fair price or at any quoted or given price. If government owns the resources which were previously held by the private sector, that process is nationalization. So it is transfer. Nationalization is your transfer of ownership in government hand. Are we here? Transfer of ownership in government's hand, which was previously held by your private sector. This process of nationalization. So let's say a country decides to nationalize its banks. So if a country which were previously, I say, take an example of a country where banks were privately held, and now country decides to nationalize these banks. It means that country is moving towards which direction? It is moving towards socialism. Government ownership of the resources. Right? I changed the color. Right. So you understood this. So nationalization is the phenomenon of a country that is moving towards socialism. There is another term that I bring in. When the public sector undertakings, so public sector undertakings are your government companies. So when public sector undertakings or public sector enterprises, undertaking or enterprises, these public sector enterprises are, public sector enterprises means owned by the government, perfect feature of a socialist country, socialist economy. If these public sector undertakings are being sold to private, that means government's ownership is reduced in the government company. So earlier, let's say government owned some company 100%, Coal India Limited, and let's say they decide that they are going to sell 5% of their share to other company or other private sector. That is known as disinvestment. That is known as disinvestment. You may be knowing these terms, but I assume that we have just started. So I will teach each and everything what is required. You may know these things. If you know it, certainly you consider it as your revision. But we will build from the basics and then we will cover each and everything. Right? With the time, you will realize that how much you have read or how much do you know. So I say disinvestment is the statement, disinvestment is the characteristics of a country that is moving towards capitalism, or that is moving towards predominantly becoming capitalist country. So what India is doing? Is India doing nationalization or disinvestment? Ask these two questions. India is not doing any nationalization. It means government is not transferring the ownership of your resources from private to government hands. Whereas you will see each year in the budget, and we will be discussing your budget, we will be discussing economic survey, I'll be talking about these things in detail, but the government is transferring the ownership in PSU to private sector. This investment is happening. So India is moving towards your capitalism or marketism. India is a mixed economy. India is moving towards capitalism or marketism. So when we say mixed, what we say, it is a mix of socialism and your capitalism. This is the only mix that is possible. Look at what I say. When you say mixed economy, there are two possibilities. Number one, it can be mix of your socialism and your capitalism. It can also be, think about those three types of economies. It can also be mix of, this would remain in your mind, maybe it can be mix of communism plus your, be it your capitalism or be it your socialism. Is it possible? Is it possible? Once in the second video itself, I have mentioned one thing, that it's not possible. I have mentioned that communism is a pure idea. Either a country is communist or it's not. It's very simple. It's pure idea. It cannot be mixed with anything and called to be mixed of communism and capitalism, because these two are completely opposites. Even if socialism, even if in socialism we dictate, and many of the leaders, they dictate that we are moving towards the ideals of your communism, even if they talk about the ideals, even if you can consider socialism as one path towards communism, but communism is a pure principle. So there cannot be any mix of communism with any of these. So when we use simply mixed economy, what we are talking about is socialist versus capitalist. Two things. No country is perfectly capitalist or communist. Number two, there is no such thing as mix communism mixed with your socialism or capitalism. Okay. Why did I say that no country is perfectly capitalist or perfectly socialist? Because not all resources can be owned by the government. Now there is one example that you can think of, a country that is more towards capitalism than anything else, is your United States of America. So even if you take the example of United States of America, on that continuum where you had your capitalism on one side and communism on this side, you will know one thing, that here also in United States of America also government owns something. If government owns something, then it cannot be perfectly capitalist. It means they are somewhere here. They are near to the capitalism. Let's say Obamacare, what it is. If government provides you insurance, then is the market's role is not there. If government in United States of America under Obamacare, government is taking care of the health needs, that is your insurances. Now what is happening, if they are providing for these, it means government initiative there, they have some of the resources. Let's say army is there, that is one resource. Let's say some of the nuclear facilities and all that, these are your resources. So if the resources are owned by the government, it is not perfectly capitalist. I repeat again, this is predominantly capitalist. So United States of America is predominantly capitalist, right? And India, China, these are mixed economies which are moving towards your capitalism. Let's say if a country where resources are, let's say 60-70% owned by the government, then these would be known as your predominantly socialist countries. Now let me talk about another concept, and you need to understand one thing. Have you heard of a term known as welfare state? Many of the students come up with this statement that, sir, socialist country is welfare country. So let's say socialist, if an economy is socialist economy, that is going to be welfare. And how do you differentiate between these two? That is what is required. Are these the same? Or is there any difference? That is what I am going to explain to you. Remember, socialism, it's a type of economy. That is the thing that I told you. It's a type of economy. Whereas welfareism is a type of government or type of state. Welfareism is reflected in its policies. A country can be a welfare country, be it in terms of your resources, it can be your capitalist. Even a capitalist country can be welfare country. Even a socialist country can be welfare country. Welfare country is when government's expenditure, when government takes care of the basic needs of the citizens if they are not able to fulfill that. So if, let's say, government provides for let's say health facilities, let's say for education facility, let's say for food, shelter, clothing, if government provides for these, then that country is your welfare country, or that state is a welfare state. Again, I felt the need to change the color. This health facility can be provided in two ways. Let's say capitalist country, they have very high tax income because private ownership is there. By this tax income, let's say they do the direct transfer in the hands of those who are not having access to the health facilities. This country would also be called your welfare country. A socialist country, most likely what they would do, they would provide health facility by owning the hospitals. So if they own the hospitals and then they provide you, let's say you go to the hospital, give 2 rupees and get the checkup and medicines for free. That the way of doing things may be different, but this still is your welfare. So welfareism is different than socialism. Most likely a socialist country would be a welfare country. A socialist economy would be a welfare, would inhibit a welfare state. Because here comes the political compulsions. I'm moving towards politics, in fact. Political compulsion is that how would you justify owning the resources? See, if anyone owns the resources, let's say government owns the resources, how would they justify it? Government has to justify the ownership of the resources. And the justification would be done by floating various schemes, programs, which conform to the need of the people. So it's okay if you own coal mines and gold mines and your railway, till you provide for affordability, you provide for care of the people, you provide for the extra facility to those who are not able to afford it. So welfareism is a justification for socialism, and most likely the socialist countries would be welfare countries, but capitalist country can also be a welfare country. That needs to be kept in mind. Right? So what is the conclusion of our class? What did we study? Number one, no country is perfectly capitalist or communist. All countries are mixed economies. Number 2, countries moving towards capitalism from, let's say, mixed, that is your predominantly socialism to predominantly capitalism. If these are moving towards capitalism on that continuum, it means they go for the disinvestment. It means selling of the ownership, government ownership in private hands. And the countries which are moving towards socialism will go for nationalization of the resources. Let's say your banks, your agriculture and whatever. Then welfareism. Welfare state is different from a socialist economy. Welfare is the outlook. Socialist is a type of economy. And even a capitalist country can be a welfare country if it actively takes care of the basic needs of the citizens. That's the end of this lecture. Thank you so much. God bless you.